Welcome to this video in our Opening Heaven's Door training series. What we're doing is we're seeking to encourage you to become the very best you can be in prayer ministry. Now, I want to look at something seasonal in this time of Advent. Advent is a time when we traditionally try and grasp something of the bigger picture of life. A season when we can look at some of the great themes like judgment, second coming, things we can shy away from at other times of the year. I want to ask what some of these themes have to say about this ministry to which we have been called. And so I want to ponder specifically this idea of the second coming of Jesus. Now, to be honest, the second coming probably isn't something a lot of folks see with any great urgency. Now, certainly, if we were living in a hostile environment, suffering under unjust punishment, the idea of Jesus coming to take us home would have a great attraction. We probably long for it with a real passion. But if you're in a situation whereby you kind of enjoy this life and enjoy all it has to bring, the idea of Jesus taking us home may not have quite the same urgency. But I discovered as I began to think about it that actually it's a stunning subject that's so relevant to us all. Now, I don't know how you, in a sense, view the second coming. I suppose I had a view that, one day, without warning, the clouds would kind of glow with his presence, and there would be Jesus. And we'd suddenly fly up towards him, and we'd all go to heaven while the earth, I suppose, gets destroyed. But I wonder, is that what it's really about? It strikes me the second coming is not an isolated event, but actually a part of the whole sweep of history. And so to put it into context, we have to go back not just to the first coming, but right back to the very creation of the world. It all begins in Genesis chapter 1. Now, it's not about how literally we take that story, and it may well be a kind of form of a poem. But the point is this. It starts with the creation of this beautiful world. Far more beautiful than anything we've experienced in this life. Because as well as the undiluted beauty of creation, we read about mankind and God dwelling together in unity. We have purpose, fellowship, and togetherness. And that's how it's made. That was God's plan. That was God's great dream. I think we often rush over that and sort of go into how it all went terribly wrong without really drinking in the wonder of God's great dream for us. To be living on earth in fellowship with him, working to bring about his purposes, tending this beautiful earth with him. But as we read through, we do get to Genesis 3. That souring of God's great dream. The appearance of sin and the ensuing great divide between God and mankind. Now, up until that time, heaven and earth had been combined. Heaven was simply a word used for the skies. Not a place you go when you die, because death was not part of this original dream. So only after Genesis 3 do we get this sense of a divide between heaven and earth. And that's the context into which the rest of the Bible is played out. That's the context for all history as we know it. That's the context in which we have been born. But into this context, an amazing event happened, the birth of Jesus. This was the beginning of the outworking of God bringing his original dream back into reality. The first coming of Jesus, that what we're going to celebrate at Christmas, is the account of God becoming man, entering into the world he's come to unite with heaven again. Now, through his ministry, he demonstrates the invading power of God and his vision of what mankind should be like, healed and restored to a relationship with him. At the cross we have two stunning, simultaneous, actually opposite things going on. First, the ongoing rejection of his mission by humankind. But secondly, the taking upon himself of our sin, that we might step into the glorious intimacy of being forgiven by God. And then we read he's raised to life on this earth as a sign that the dream of God has taken a dramatic new turn, that death is now not the final power. And then comes the glorious event of the ascension, where there's a real coming together of heaven and earth as they're now combined, as the body of Jesus takes its place at the right hand of the Father in heaven. From there, the Spirit is poured out upon us, that we can begin to enter into that experience of the coming together of spirit and humanity that was in Jesus. So that's a kind of a short history of the universe up until now. It's been a pretty exciting time, but it's going to get even more exciting. Now, where we left it was that Jesus is in heaven and we are on earth. Now, please don't think that means he's miles away. Heaven is like another real but unseen dimension of our own existence. It's all around us, touching us. If heaven was miles up there, how could Jesus be filling the whole universe? How could he actually be with us now, as the Bible reveals he is? Now, Jesus is with us. And that's stunning news. But it still isn't what God originally dreamt of. His original creation was heaven and earth combined. And that's what he's going to do, to create a new heaven and a new earth. And that's what his new appearing, what we call the second coming, will be all about. His appearance is going to usher in this new heaven and earth. Now, the old is not going to be destroyed, but rather transformed and redeemed. I suppose the question we're left with is, well, so what? I mean, if that's all going to happen, what does that mean for you and me? Well, actually, it means an awful lot to us. Because we're not just passive pawns on the big chessboard of life. We're actually God's co-workers. That's how Paul describes us in both 1 and 2 Corinthians. We are those who are called to work alongside him for the kingdom. Now, how does this fit in with this new heaven and new earth that Jesus is going to usher in? Well, there are two stunning things about working for the kingdom. The first is this. Every act in the kingdom is significant, whether we see it bear fruit or not. I wonder if you remember the story of the sheep and the goats in Matthew chapter 25. The scene is, the great gathering, when everyone is standing before the judgment seat of God. And people are separated into those who have the approval of God and those who don't. But the things that people have done that meet with his approval are things like visiting a sick person, helping to clothe someone, things that may have been done and not felt particularly appreciated at the time. But every action is noted by Jesus because he says, I was there. I saw it. I noticed it as much as if you did it for me. The small things we do are seen and received as if we did it for Jesus, no matter what the response from the people to whom these actions were done. Every time we do something out of a response to God, whether we see the result of it or not, it has a significance beyond what you can see. Can you imagine what it would be like if we could see our ministry to people as if we were ministering to Jesus himself? What a difference that would make. We'd probably be far more attentive, more loving, more patient, more willing to give the time and energy to every person that came to us. I imagine we'd also be more attentive to what we could learn from them. Because I'm pretty certain if I had the chance to minister to Jesus, I'd get a lot more out of it than I think he would. And perhaps we could try and catch that. This ministry to that person, to this person, it's for Jesus. There's even more. Because the second thing about these acts for the kingdom is this. These are not just acts in themselves. They're like seeds sown into the future kingdom. In 1 Corinthians 15:58, Paul writes these words. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labour in the Lord is not in vain. I think what he's saying is that whatever we do for God is not wasted. Why? Because everything will be redeemed by him for his glory. Listen to these words by N.T. Wright, who sums up beautifully what God does with our deeds. He writes this. Every act of love, gratitude and kindness, every work of art or music inspired by the love of God and delight in the beauty of his creation, every minute spent teaching a severely handicapped child to read or to walk, every act of care and nurture, of comfort and support for one's fellow human beings, and for that matter, one's fellow non-human creatures, and of course, every prayer, all spirit-led teaching, every deed which spreads the gospel, builds up the church, embraces and embodies holiness rather than corruption, and makes the name of Jesus honoured in the world, all of this will find its way through the resurrecting power of God into the new creation which God will one day make. When I read those words, suddenly it kind of makes sense of our ministry. Actually, it makes sense of all of our lives. It's so easy to look back on our lives as a list of failed opportunities, of wasted moments, of things that didn't produce as much fruit as we wanted. We look at our prayer ministry and remember the occasions when it didn't seem to work, when the person may have misunderstood what we were seeking to do. And we wonder then, well, how effective has our ministry ever really been? Perhaps that's the wrong way to look at it, though. Could it be? Could it be that every act of building into this new earth, every prayer we've ever prayed, every time we've listened to someone's story, every time we stood by somebody in ministry, it's actually a seed that is going to bear fruit, that's going to reach its fruition? And what he does is Jesus takes these actions and he transforms them. Remember the story of feeding the 5,000? One boy has 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and there are 5,000 hungry folk. It's not really much of an equation. And if the boy had just handed his food round to those nearest him, it wouldn't really have made much difference. But what the boy does is he gives this tiny offering to Jesus. And in the hands of Jesus, that offering is utterly transformed and becomes a feast for them all. And I think that's what he does with what we do for others. We may not see the effect of our sowing seeds into this world, but in his hands, these actions take on a whole new significance. Every action will be redeemed and transformed into the new heaven and the new earth ushered in by the appearance of Jesus. And suddenly this appearing, this second coming, is not just a random event that happens sometime at the end. It actually becomes the most fulfilling and exciting event we can look forward to. Something that makes sense of the whole of our lives. This is a glorious ministry that we're involved in, but it's very easy, I think, to get demoralized, to judge it by whether we feel successful or not. But let's step back from analysing it in terms of the immediate effect of our ministry and begin to see it in the broad sweep of history, of us being called to work with him for the growth of his kingdom. Now, I hope that's been encouraging, because I think he wants us to be encouraged. Now, we have a couple of websites you might find interesting. healingmission.org is where you'll find resources and information to bless you in this ministry in which you're involved. Our other website is encounterprayer.net, and that's a whole site dedicated to sharing what we call encounter prayer, a way of encouraging people to meet with Jesus now, to have a glimpse today of that eternal encounter that's going to be theirs. Well, take care, and God bless, and be encouraged in the ministry he's given you.